The world knows the fairy tale ending. The loyal mistress finally marries her prince and decades later is crowned queen. But in the rarefied atmosphere of Buckingham Palace, there are no fairy tales. There are only cold, unbreakable rules. And on one specific, rain-swept morning, Queen Camilla discovered exactly what happens when the king's duty finally outweighs his heart. They say the ancient walls of Buckingham Palace have no ears, but on this day, the silence itself seemed to scream the final verdict. Just look at the image they tried to suppress. The woman who spent half a century fighting for the highest seat in the kingdom, now stripped of her honor, being physically supported by aides as she is driven from the gates. Those tears you see are not simple sadness. They are the absolute, bitter end of a dream. This is not a rumor. This is the truth of Camilla's final, devastating day as a royal consort. This is Camilla's last stand. The dramatic collapse that happened not in private, but in front of royal guards and staff who were sworn to secrecy. We will show you the moment King Charles delivered his final, cruel betrayal. But the story does not begin today. It begins with the one thing Queen Elizabeth II did before her death that Camilla feared most: a secret, binding decree that could void her crown at any moment. The question that kept Camilla awake was simple. How far would Charles go to protect the Windsor name from the Parker Bowles legacy? Over this hour, we will track the exact moments of her reckless ascent, her unchecked ambition, and her ultimate, total failure. We start by pulling back the curtain on the subtle power struggle that began the moment Charles ascended the throne, and the first shot fired in the war for the monarchy's soul. For Camilla, the crowning was the victory. She finally possessed the title, the status, the acceptance. But for King Charles, the duty had only just begun. The monarchy, he knew, was more fragile than ever, and his personal life had always been its weakest point. He initiated a comprehensive top-to-bottom review of the entire royal household, every expenditure, every asset, every single appointment made during his mother's final, frail years. He was not looking for mere waste. He was searching for any loophole, any sign of an overreach, any evidence of the Parker Bowles encroachment into the ancient Windsor domain. Camilla, sensing the temporary nature of her victory, began her own maneuvers. She believed her decades-long relationship with Charles gave her unique immunity. Her first fatal mistake was assuming love was stronger than the law. She began pushing to secure titles and estates for her own children, Tom and Laura. She wanted them cemented as permanent fixtures in the royal orbit, ensuring their security for generations. She was building an alternate, parallel dynasty right under the king's nose, convinced her position was untouchable. Charles saw this not as an act of love, but as an act of betrayal against the bloodline. He was haunted by the memory of his mother's warnings and the promises he'd made to protect the sacred lineage. When he saw his family's legacy being diluted by his wife's ambition, he knew he had to act. But a king cannot simply exile his queen without cause. He needed a moral shield, an unimpeachable source of authority. And that shield came in the form of his son, Prince William.
The Prince of Wales, views the crown as an ancient trust, not a playground for personal gain. He had spent years repairing the damage of his parents' divorce, and he was enraged by Camilla's subtle attempts to destabilize the future for his own children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. He saw her influence as a direct threat to the Windsor name. We have explosive sources inside Kensington Palace who describe a furious, closed-door confrontation between father and son that occurred in the depths of a winter night. William did not shout, he presented evidence. He delivered a devastating dossier detailing Camilla's increasing demands, particularly concerning the misuse of royal foundation funds and the questionable commercial ventures tied to her children. This wasn't gossip. This was a meticulously researched document detailing the improper transfer of money, titles, and potential future land rights. For Charles, William's intervention was not an attack, but a lifeline. permission to finally do what duty had long demanded, using the moral shield of his son to justify the destruction of his wife's ambition. William's silence in public became Charles's greatest political weapon in private. The war for the monarchy was no longer about a marriage, it was about the bloodline. Unaware that her own stepson had secured the final evidence against her, Camilla mistook Charles's increasing distance for passive weakness. She doubled down. Her confidence was her blind spot. She began to actively campaign publicly for a greater role for her children in royal life, hinting at future dukedoms and earldoms for her grandsons. This public maneuvering was her fatal mistake. She believed the palace was hers to command, but she forgot the first rule of the crown. The king is the only one who dictates who stays and who goes. She pushed too hard, too fast. We saw the evidence in the sudden, unexplained cancellation of several low-profile royal engagements involving her family members. It was the first sign of the purge, a quiet retraction of access and influence orchestrated directly by Charles's private secretary. The pressure from the public, amplified by William's calculated silence, became a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. Camilla, surrounded by the crumbling confidence of her own team, continued to fight, convinced her husband would never break their bond. The final straw came when she attempted to secure a highly sensitive Commonwealth post for her son Tom. This was a realm Charles considered sacrosanct, a political line that could not be crossed. By reaching for international influence, she provided Charles with the necessary political justification for her removal. The king knew he had to act decisively. The crown could not risk a public scandal involving charity funds and overseas influence. The machinery of state was now moving, and Camilla had no idea she was already caught in the gears. The public was told Queen Elizabeth II's will was a matter of state, private and settled. But deep within the royal archives, guarded in a lead-lined safe only the king and his most senior lawyer could access, lay a final codicil, a secret instruction that spelled out Camilla's fate. This document, signed in the final years of the Queen's life, stipulated that if the consort were ever deemed a liability to the crown's financial or public stability, the monarch held the unilateral, unquestionable right to dissolve her specific titles and privileges. This was the Queen's ultimate foresight, the ultimate loyalty test devised by a monarch who understood power better than anyone. This was the silent threat hanging over Camilla's head, the sword of Damocles that Charles had the power to drop. Armed with this ancient binding decree and William's modern evidence of financial overreach, Charles knew he was legally and morally untouchable.
Camilla arrived at the palace, believing she was due for a routine security briefing. Instead, Charles led her into the private library, a room built without external windows, soundproofed and sequestered. Inside, the air was cold. There were no pleasantries, no staff. Only Charles, Camilla, and the heavy burden of 50 years of shared history. The conversation began civilly, a cold discussion about duty and necessity. But then, Charles laid out the dossier. Sources say the king's face was unreadable, his voice steady, devoid of all emotion. This was not the Prince Charles who had risked his life for love. This was the king, a symbol of the institution he was sworn to protect. Camilla's initial reaction was disbelief, then raw fury, demanding to know who dared betray her. But Charles only pointed to William's dossier, backed by the ancient decree. It was in this room that Charles delivered the final, devastating blow. He did not file for divorce, which would have been a media catastrophe. Instead, he simply invoked the Queen's final decree. He officially stripped her of the title, Her Majesty, the Queen. The word Queen was retracted. She would revert to a lesser historic title, a clear public demotion that left her essentially powerless and removed from the core of the state. The moment the words left his mouth, Camilla's resistance broke. The fight was over. The years of ambition, the endless struggle for acceptance, the quiet power she had accumulated, it was all gone in a single, cold decree. The betrayal was complete. Camilla stared at the man she had loved since 1970 and saw only a monarch. The emotional core of this collapse occurred outside that room. Witnesses recount the scene as Camilla stumbled out of the library doors. She could barely stand. Her carefully constructed facade of dignity was gone. She was crying hysterically, not the controlled weeping of a royal, but the raw, broken sobs of a woman who had lost her life's purpose. Her most senior aides rushed her out through a rarely used side door to avoid the waiting press, but not before the royal guards saw the tears, the definitive, unforgettable image of her defeat. Her private residence, Clarence House, was effectively sealed off, her personal staff dismissed, and her family's access to the palace was revoked. The Parker Bowles legacy was officially erased from the royal narrative within 24 hours. In the days that followed, William and Catherine stepped forward, silent in their success, yet visibly supportive of the king. They had won. The line of succession was secured, the crown's image protected from the very kind of personal scandal that had plagued Charles's first marriage. We examine how this entire purge fundamentally changes the future of the British monarchy, shifting power irrevocably toward the younger generation and forever cementing the lesson: the crown will always be merciless towards those who threaten its survival. Now in quiet, cold exile, Camilla is left to contemplate her fate. The woman who once symbolized Charles's great rebellion against convention is now the symbol of his absolute adherence to duty. The Great Purge is complete, but the crown's secrets remain. We know of the story of Camilla's shocking downfall, the betrayal by Charles, and the calculating role of Prince William. But the most dangerous part of this story is not about Camilla. It's about the document that condemned her. The content of Queen Elizabeth II's secret decree. We know it was used to depose Camilla, but what were the other instructions? What did the late queen predict for the crown's future? The shocking truth is that document, designed to protect the monarchy, contains a specific, final stipulation that was meant to be executed after Charles's passing. We believe that hidden within that decree is the ultimate trap, a secret clause that now puts Prince William himself at risk of losing his future throne. It's a condition Queen Elizabeth placed on her grandson's inheritance, a final failsafe that could strip the future king of his power if he fails to meet a specific, impossible standard set by his grandmother. You won't believe the condition Elizabeth placed on her grandson's inheritance. To unlock the explosive details of the Queen's true will, the one that could now destroy the Prince of Wales, make sure you subscribe to Royal Legacy right now and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss our next chapter in this royal saga. Did Charles secure the monarchy, or did he merely expose it to an even greater, final, catastrophic threat? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.